Great, great.
Mhm.
So, Bryan Wallace, I just want to start this recording right now and say that
Mhm.
I'm interviewing Bryan Wallace. He is a realtor, he is an associate broker, and he is an attorney, and he does title. And today, Bryan is going to tell us all a little bit about himself for maybe about 3 to 5 minutes, his background. And then he's going to tell everyone why title is so important and what he does at his title company. And you all have his information, or it's on the screen where you can get in touch with Bryan and ask him more title questions. So Bryan, thanks again for coming over and speaking to the world on YouTube and other various platforms. Please introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure, no problem. Like Mary said, my name is Bryan Wallace. Been practicing law overall for approximately 20 years, going on this year. I've been first started practicing law in 2000, and I've been doing real estate law since 2005. And I originally started in Chicago, and in Chicago, it's a little different than the DC area. Everybody had an attorney. So in Chicago, you had an attorney representing the buyer, and you had an attorney representing the seller. So that's kind of how I got my start. I was representing buyers and sellers in transactions, and what we would do is negotiate back and forth once the contract was in place to make sure that our clients were protected. And part of doing that as well was getting as a seller's attorney in Chicago or in Illinois, they would order what we call title insurance. So I've been doing this for a little while. I've been in the DC area since 2010, and since then I've been assisting buyers and sellers in real estate purchases, as well as an attorney that does title closings. And some people may wonder, what is this title closing stuff? What is title insurance? Why do I need it? Why is this an extra cost that's showing up on my during my transaction? I didn't plan for it. Title insurance is essential. And part of the reason it's essential is because if you're a buyer, you want to know, and I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, Mary, should I go ahead and get into this? You want to know, what you're purchasing. You may think you're buying a home from John Smith, but what happens if John Smith doesn't actually own the home?
Oh, that's very good. I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up because um, um, most people don't understand title and
Mm-hmm.
ownership. And when they don't really, what happens that when there's a flaw they call it a chain of title. Could you explain what a chain of title is?
Yeah, essentially, chain of title, what we do at the title company, I work with Passport, is we do a search. And we search through the public records, basically the land records, to make sure to ascertain the chain of title from one buyer to the next buyer to the next buyer, from one buyer to a seller to the next buyer, from that now seller to the next buyer. You want to make sure you have proper chain of title and there's no flaws in that chain of title. If somebody passes away, how do you know who owns the property at that point? Sometimes the property may go through probate. If somebody goes through foreclosure, who owns the property? Does the bank own the property? Does the owner does the person who got foreclosed on own the property? These are all important things you want to figure out before you put your money up as a buyer, and before your lender, if you have a lender, before your lender puts their money up to make it to consummate the purchase. If these things aren't figured out, on the front end, it could be disastrous on the back end, because you don't want somebody to show up to the house and say, "Hey, this is actually my house. Here's my deed. I own this house." So what protects you from that happening? And essentially what protects you from that happening is what we call title insurance. So as a title agent, what we do is we ascertain the chain of title before your purchase happens, and then determine that, okay, this person is the proper seller, and at that point we provide insurance just in case there's any type of problem that comes down the line later. If somebody says, "Oh, there was a lien on the property. Oh, this person owed money or owed somebody money, and it was put, and there was another lender, there was a second mortgage on the property. You as a buyer will never know this stuff unless you do some extensive research, and it's a lot of work to do. So, what my title company does and what we do is we actually do the research. We make sure, that the person you're buying the home from actually owns the home. We make sure that there's no there's nothing that's going to come, there's nothing that's going to appear on your title or appear on your property later, as far as a lien or anything like that you didn't know about. And that's important because ultimately, after the transaction occurs, you are now responsible for that property, and you don't want another lender to pop up and say, oh, the person you bought the property from, they still owe me $10,000, so I'm putting a lien on your property right now.
Okay.
You don't want stuff like that to happen. So it's important that. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
What I wanted to ask you, were you explaining a defect in title? Is that what you were just doing?
Yeah. I may not use the proper terminology, but yeah, that's what we call a defect. If there's something that's on title that comes up that possibly the owner didn't even know about, or even they may have known about it, but they didn't disclose it during the transaction. And if they don't disclose it and clear this stuff up during the transaction, the buyer will essentially then be responsible for this stuff in the future, unless they have title insurance. And what title insurance will do is, if you say, okay, if you find a defect that comes after you've purchased the property, you've purchased title insurance, and we as the title insurer will then be responsible for making sure that either that defect is removed properly, through this through no fault of your own. This will be money that will be expended by the title company, or we will actually compensate the buyer. If there's a title problem later, we will compensate the buyer for that problem, and that could actually end up turn out to be in compensating the buyer for the full price of the property.
Okay, so let me just ask you a question.
Minus the loan. So there's all kinds of things that can happen.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me just ask you a question. So how else, we have about another minute and a half here, 2 minutes. How else can you, as a title, what other services? Like, I know I had some clients and they wanted to amend their deed. What do people have to do? Let's say, you get married, you want to add somebody to the deed of the house, or you get divorced and you get the house, you want to take somebody off. Exactly. If you could, in about 90 seconds or so, wrap that up and tell us how we would go about taking care of that.
It's not a problem. I mean, usually what happens is, us as a title company, we can do a search and prepare the proper documents that need to be filed. And, if you have say you get married, you want to add your wife to the property, your husband to the property. These are things that we can do. We prepare the documents. We make sure they get filed with the proper county records, which may be, for example, Baltimore City County or Baltimore County. We make sure those things get filed, and once they're filed, then we can actually provide insurance for that. Some people may want insurance on that type of work. Other people don't. It's up to you. But part of our stuff is we act as the person who assures that at the end of the day that your property is properly protected, and that that the owners need, if you want to make an ownership change, that those things are properly filed with the county. So that's essentially what we can do as a title company is correspond with the county and make sure that the paperwork is properly filed.
Well, that wraps it up for today. I want to thank Bryan Wallace for coming over and coming up to Zoom and talking to everyone. And if you have any questions about title, Bryan's information has been on screen. I want you to click subscribe if you want to continue to know when I come on air with Clients First, a broadcast by Marianne Foreman with Taylor Properties. I'm a realtor working in the greater Baltimore metropolitan area, and I really take my job seriously, protecting my clients and making sure They understand the entire process. So we're going to have a lot of interviews with people like Bryan, and I want to make sure that you all share these videos and you utilize Bryan when and you think of him and passport title when you're purchasing a home, your second home, adding, doing any changes to your deed, etc. So thanks again for helping educate my clients and my viewers, Bryan.
Oh, not a problem, Mary. And one other point I want to make is don't hesitate to call me or email me with any questions. There are no dumb questions. And one thing I like to do with my realtor friends like Mary and other people is provide an estimate to, to her clients, so she knows, up front exactly what things are going to cost, because that's important. When you're going to the closing table, you want to know, how much is this title insurance going to cost me? Because there are some people out there that will take advantage of this situation.
Well,
And I'll pride myself on not being one of them. I always want to be upfront.
okay, thank you so much, Bryan. We're out of time for today, and this will be posted. You're watching it on YouTube. You're going to see it on Facebook. Make sure you like it, share it, and tell people about Bryan. Thank you so much for coming, and see you next time.